If you reduce these payments, some of us won't know how to keep the lights on.
Mr. Vance, I truly understand decisions are based on the financial condition of the system.
I understand the numbers, ma'am, but people like me worked for these benefits our whole lives.
Mr.
I'm
Vance,
not asking for special treatment.
Mr. Vance, I believe we've explained the situation.
There isn't, and I'll have to find someone who can listen.
A quiet countdown has officially begun. The June 2026 Social Security report delivered a chilling verdict. The National Retirement Fund is bleeding out, pacing toward total depletion by the final months of 2032, an emergency that will instantly strip a brutal 22% off every senior's check. To the suit and tie bureaucrats sitting behind bulletproof glass at the Social Security Administration, Arthur Vance was just another number. A 69-year-old retired grain farmer from a forgotten county whose monthly check was about to be slashed by 22%. When Arthur stood before the regional director and quietly warned them that they were breaking a promise made to millions of hardworking Americans, they simply smiled, stamped his paperwork, and dismissed him. They thought it was over. But 3 months later, Arthur didn't just appeal. He walked straight into a federal courtroom, carrying a faded blue ledger from 1983 and a single sheet of paper the government thought was buried forever. The judge smirked when Arthur began to speak, until the old farmer pointed his finger at the defense table and revealed a shocking truth that turned the entire room ice cold. That was the exact moment the smirk vanished from the judge's face, and the entire courtroom went dead silent. To understand how a quiet farmer from Nebraska ended up paralyzing a federal courtroom, we have to look back to the spring of last year. Arthur Vance had spent 45 years under the blistering sun, pouring his sweat into the soil to feed a nation. Every single month, a chunk of his hard-earned paycheck was automatically deducted for Social Security. It wasn't a handout, it was a pact, a promise sealed by the government. But when his wife passed away, and inflation began to tear through small-town grocery stores, Arthur noticed something terrifying. Rumors were swirling about a new law passed in Washington, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. On paper, it promised relief. In reality, it quietly starved the Social Security Trust Fund. Soon, a cold, formal letter arrived in Arthur's mailbox. Because the national reserves were drying up faster than expected, his upcoming benefits were facing a brutal 22% cut. For a billionaire, 22% is a rounding error. For a 69-year-old widower living on a rural homestead, it meant choosing between his medicine or his heating bill. Arthur didn't panic. He did what any honest man would do. He put on his best suit, drove 60 miles to the nearest regional Social Security Administration office, and asked for an explanation. He sat in a plastic chair for 4 hours before a young director in a tailored suit finally called his name. Arthur laid his documents on the desk. He explained that rural seniors who worked physical labor couldn't just go back to work at 70 years old. He calmly warned the director, "If you cut the lifelines of the people who built this county, the law will catch up to you. You are draining a fund that belongs to the workers, not the politicians." The director didn't even look up from his screen. He gave a dry, practiced chuckle. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "the system is running out of money. By the 2030s, the trust fund will hit empty. It's basic math. There is nothing you or anyone in this town can do about it. Next in line, please." They dismissed him like he was invisible. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed Arthur Vance was just an uneducated farmer who would accept defeat. That night, Arthur didn't sleep. He went up to his attic and opened a heavy iron chest that belonged to his late father, a man who had survived the Great Depression and served as a county clerk. Deep inside, buried beneath old land deeds, Arthur found what he was looking for: a faded blue ledger from 1983, alongside an official, certified transcript of a forgotten congressional hearing. You see, back in 1983, the United States faced an identical Social Security crisis. Back then, Leaders came together to pass a strict legal firewall to ensure the trust fund could never be raided or manipulated by future political maneuvers without an absolute, unanimous emergency declaration. As Arthur studied the old text with a magnifying glass, his eyes widened. He realized something incredible. The recent legal loopholes the bureaucrats were using to justify the sudden benefit cuts completely bypassed the strict statutory protections established in 1983. The government wasn't just managing a shortage, they were violating a standing federal mandate. Armed with nothing but his father's ledger and the truth, Arthur bypassed the local office entirely. He filed a formal emergency injunction in federal court. On the day of the hearing, the atmosphere was thick with arrogance. The government's high-priced legal team brought stacks of digital charts and economic projections. They argued that Arthur's case was a waste of the court's time. The judge, looking tired and impatient, smirked down at the old farmer. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, "do you have anything substantial to add, or are we done here?" Arthur stood up slowly. He adjusted his collar, picked up the single sheet of certified 1983 mandate text, and walked to the podium. He didn't yell. He didn't read from a complex legal script. Instead, he looked directly at the judge and said, "Your Honor, page 42 of the federal statute before you explicitly states that trust fund allocations for citizens born before 1960 cannot be altered by a standard budget reconciliation bill. The defense claims the fund is drying up due to natural math, but they forgot to mention that they illegally diverted $3 billion from our district's reserves last winter to fund a corporate infrastructure subsidy. Here is the certified transaction receipt from the Federal Registry." Arthur slammed the single sheet of paper onto the clerk's desk. The government lawyers froze. The smirk completely vanished from the judge's face. He snatched the document, his eyes darting across the text as the color drained from his cheeks. The defense lawyers began frantically whispering, realizing their entire defense had just collapsed. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The judge adjourned the court for 3 hours. When he returned, his tone had completely changed. He ruled that the local administration had acted outside its legal boundaries and ordered an immediate freeze on any benefit reductions for Arthur and the seniors of his entire county, pending a full federal audit. Arthur Vance proved that the system isn't invincible. When big corporations, complex laws, and powerful bureaucrats try to push ordinary, hardworking people into a corner, they often forget one thing: the resilience of the American farmer. They thought Arthur would break. Instead, he broke their silence. If you believe that our seniors deserve every single penny they worked their entire lives for, and that ordinary people can still stand up to impossible odds, hit that subscribe button. Join us next week on Harvest Echoes by Carter for more stories of truth, courage, and rural justice. Thanks for watching. Arthur Vance proved that the system isn't invincible. Our seniors earned every single penny through a lifetime of hard work. If you believe ordinary people can stand up to impossible odds, subscribe to Harvest Echoes by Carter.